We will likely have some people straggling in because of the traffic situation, as I said, but we're going to get underway right now. For everybody who's here, we thank you very much for participating in this event. My name is Bruce Williams, and I'm not running for anything.
Run for cover.
But I am the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Pleased to be here today. Also here to recognize and acknowledge that we are gathered on the land of the Lekwungen-speaking nations known to us as Songhees and Cousacks. This event today will be a very respectful gathering. This is going to be something where no one will talk over anyone else. Everyone will be patient with everyone else. If you have any comments that you want to make to anybody who's a candidate, would you please wait until after this event and speak with them outside. We don't need any sort of disruption in this event. We have a lot of information to cover. We want to make sure that all the facts are told and understood, so very much appreciate your respect for the folks that are taking part here today, and we appreciate you doing that. So what we're going to do first of all is I'm going to introduce all of the candidates that we have here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the format of what we're going to do today, and then we will get on with some remarks from the folks that are up here on the stage with me. So joining us today in no particular order, Elizabeth May, candidate for the Green Party, Laurel Collins, candidate for the New Democratic Party, Grant Cool for the Conservative Party of Canada, and Will Greaves from the Liberal Party of Canada. Eventually you're going to have some other folks come up here and ask questions and do a little bit of framework on their particular part of our economy and their sector of the economy. They are Rory Kulmula, who is the CEO of the Vancouver Island Construction Association. There he is now. Jeff Bray is the CEO of the Downtown Victoria Business Association. Also here today is Robert Louis Manning. He is the CEO of the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority. And Paul Nursey, the CEO of Destination Greater Victoria. Thank you all for being here today. And again, you will have remarks from those folks coming up shortly. I'm going to talk about workforce in a couple of minutes. Construction Association will talk about housing and construction. Downtown Business Association, community safety. The Harbour Authority will talk about marine opportunities, and Destination Greater Victoria about infrastructure investment. So to get us underway, we're going to have a 1 or 2 minute opening remark from each of the candidates, and we will begin with Elizabeth May, please.
First, I want to thank the Chamber for organizing this event. It's really important that all of us as candidates for whatever party we're in and whatever role we hope to play in the future Parliament have top of mind at all times the concerns of the business community in the area we will hope to represent in Parliament. I've been honoured as a Member of Parliament for Saanich Gulf Islands to have been deeply grateful for the advice and updates that I've received over the years from the people who are here in this room. And Robert, I will mention Anchorages. We are, as candidates and as parliamentarians, and for me personally as co-leader of the Green Party, enormously gratified when people look past the green label and realize, oh yeah, she actually supports small business. She's actually trying to help. She's going to bat for us. And that's the reputation I hope I have with you, and one I hope to maintain and continue to do the work. This is a really important opportunity. I'm really glad to have representation here from 4 parties that really care about this country. And it is something that right now I feel pulled together and inspired by our collective will to work together for Team Canada. I am in the past a lawyer. I grew up in the tourism business on the Cabot Trail in Cape Breton, running a restaurant and gift shop. I have background, therefore, in lots of pre-political experience. I didn't join a political party till I was over 50. And I think having experience in real jobs, in real life, and running business is a very important precursor to being able to be useful in the Parliament of Canada. I hope to continue that work. I'm deeply grateful for this opportunity to exchange ideas with you, and most of all, to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Throughout the speaking parts today, if you hear a little ding, it sounds like that means you have 30 seconds left. Okay? Next, Laurel Collins, New Democratic Party.
Well, this is a critically important election, and I've been hearing from people in our community that they are worried about the threats from Donald Trump, but also about what a Pierre Poilievre government would mean for people. And this is my 3rd election campaign, and what I've been seeing is more people getting involved with the NDP than ever before here in Victoria. And there's a reason for that. It's because we know that our future is on the line. Here in Victoria, for the past 2 decades, election after election, it has been New Democrats who stop Conservatives, and it has been New Democrats who fight for what matters most to you. Since 2019, I have been fighting for this community. I've fought for stronger protections for the environment, for investments in housing and healthcare, and I was part of a small but mighty group of New Democrats who won dental care and child care and pharmacare, free diabetes medication and contraception. You know, these are making a measurable impact in people's lives. I also led the negotiations to eliminate over $2 billion in international fossil fuel subsidies. Taxpayer money the government was handing out to profitable oil and gas companies overseas. And we got that invested into climate solutions. And, you know, this upcoming 4 years, it is going to be hard. We're going to need elected representatives who are going to look out for everyday people.
Next, Grant Cool, Conservative Party of Canada.
Thank you. My name is Grant Cool, obviously. I'm an aerospace engineer. I live in the area, but I am the candidate in the Saanich, so this riding, actually where we are today. Thank you to the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce for inviting me today. Yesterday, actually, this was quite a surprise to be here. It's good also to meet and hear from some of the other candidates in this arena. Some of them are quite experienced, so it'll be interesting to see what they have to say today and how they work with this group. Being a candidate is obviously a brand new for me. It's not anything like I expected it to be. I've talked to thousands of people in a very short period of time, and those people seem to really know what they want and what they need, but they're very confused. They really don't know who to vote for. And I think it's very important that we do more of this, and I wish we had been able to do more of this already. What I'm seeing out and talking to people is that personal finances, their family finances are topmost in their minds. Non-stop inflation, plummeting disposable incomes, young families having to choose between hockey and soccer, seniors seeing their income disappear. It's disheartening to see how many people are living this close to the line. These people want relief, and we need to give it to them. Only the Conservative Party can deliver that. Their platform is direct response to what people are saying and what is happening today. They want meaningful tax reduction, homes that they can afford, safe streets, and an economy that is second to none. I look forward to what we learned today. Thanks.
Thank you. And Will Greaves, Liberal Party of Canada.
Okay, we're on. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Will Greaves. I'm the Liberal candidate in Victoria. And thank you to the Chamber for providing us with this opportunity to speak together, which I think is actually a nice change of pace for us as candidates, and of course to speak to you all directly. As a political science professor at UVic and as a politically engaged person, it feels to me like this election has been coming for a long time, that we have had major questions in this country that would ultimately be resolved through the next federal election. And ultimately, at the heart of what the ballot box questions seem to be shaping up as was the question of values. Which party do Canadians feel would best reflect their values in government? Which party was best positioned to continue to support the strong public services that Canadians rely upon? Which party was best positioned to continue our efforts to address housing affordability and lack of availability in communities across this country? Which party was best positioned in government to continue our fight to address climate change impacts in our communities and our contributions to the root cause of the global climate crisis? Which government would we as Canadians trust to best reflect our interests and our values on the international stage? All of that remains at play in this election, but with the added layer of the challenging economic situation that we are now facing with the United States. And so questions about the economy, questions about business, questions about how we can invest in local businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, to support them during what will be a difficult period of time as we grapple with these tariffs, are now top of mind for people across this country. And so it's a source of tremendous pride and great excitement for me and for many people in Canada that Mark Carney, one of the most respected Liberal, the most respected economic voices in the world, is the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada at exactly the moment when we need economic qualifications and experience in difficult times to help steer us through the challenge that we're now facing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you to you all. We're going to now move along to some comments from the panelists and myself. We as the Chamber are an organization that have kind of an umbrella attitude on the region. We deal with a lot of events. We deal with a lot of issues that come up every day in the world of business because we are the voice for business in this region. So one of the things that comes up most frequently with us is housing and healthcare. Obviously, that's in the news. That's what people talk about. Housing and healthcare are one of the reasons why people here have a difficult time attracting talent and attracting new employees. They live somewhere else in Canada or in the world. They are interested in a position here. They then take a look at how easy it is to get a family doctor and how much their home is going to cost. And that's a deterrent for a lot of people. So we have that issue front and center for us all the time. Bringing workers here that have credentials that are not recognized is also a problem, whose training has happened elsewhere in the world or even in another province. Their credentials are not recognized when they get to British Columbia, so we want to deal with that as much as we possibly can. Skills training, so that we can keep on putting people into the workforce so that businesses can flourish. There is a challenge to that right now, a very serious one, because of a limitation on international student visas. They have been reduced, which has meant a very significant reduction in revenue for post-secondaries, who many will start laying people off very soon. That will reduce their curriculum and their ability to provide the very valuable workforce that we require in this area. We need to take care of our mental health crisis. We need to take care of our overdose crisis and our drug issues. We need recovery beds. We need homes for those people. We need to make sure that they're safe and that they can get their lives back. An alarming number of those people who are affected by all of that are now living with permanent brain damage because of the impact of drug overdoses have had on them. So we need to take care of those folks as best we can, which is all a part of public safety in general. And again, my colleagues here are going to be touching on some of that stuff too. We need to market Canada as a great place to live. We need to tell the rest of the world that we're open for business, that the most beautiful part of Canada, British Columbia, is open to visitors and open to business. We need to get that message out as much as we can. We need to get a handle on climate change and what that's going to be doing to our supply chain. We saw the results of both the heat dome and the atmospheric river, which interrupted the flow of goods to and from Vancouver Island. We live on an island. We have a unique island economy. And when that atmospheric river came through and knocked out the Coquihalla and the rail lines, we realized how vulnerable our supply chain is. So part of that also would involve increasing our production of food on Vancouver Island, growing and producing it, because we on Vancouver Island import 90% of the food that we eat. That's not sustainable. We're creating jobs in other jurisdictions, and we need to get a better handle on that. So agriculture and food sustainability. We would love to see an income tax review, an audit of the Canadian tax system, which was brought in as a temporary measure to fund World War I. And it's been in place ever since and has not had an audit or an overlook just to make sure that it's as good as it can be. So we would like to see that. There's a case to be made on the supply chain side for rail service to return to Vancouver Island. And then there's that whole tariff thing, and we don't really have time to talk about that today, but it is going to keep coming up. So first of all, I have a question that I would like to ask to our panelists here. It's a workforce question. Greater Victoria is consistently among Canadian cities with the lowest unemployment rate, and employers in our region rank the challenge of finding and keeping workers among their top priorities. However, recent changes to the Temporary Foreign Workers Program surprised many businesses and curtailed the dreams of workers who were hoping for Canadian citizenship. So we bring them here, we train them, get them up to speed, then they have to go home again. So we need to take a look at that. So would your party, if elected, commit to looking at exemptions to the temporary foreign workers restrictions for regions with low unemployment like ours? And I'll begin with Will Greaves, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's a critical one, and it speaks to the intersection of our immigration policy and our economic policy. The reason why the federal government paused the intake of immigrants into Canada through the Temporary Foreign Workers Program is because the number of people who were coming in were adding further strain to our housing and our social services in a way that was not only making it challenging for Canadians who are already here to access services and homes that are obviously critical for them, but also meant that many of the immigrants coming to Canada in search of a better life and better opportunities for themselves and for their families were unable to actually live here in a good way as they had expected expected and as we as a country really have an obligation to help people achieve. So the changes that were made to the immigration system are responding to the pressures that we're seeing across the country related to housing and affordability, but also high quality public services. And so as we go forward, a re-elected Liberal government will continue to work closely with business, with industry, with other stakeholders to ensure that the immigration system is meeting the labor needs of employers across the country, and that includes different regional needs, of course, across Canada, while also really putting our shoulder to the wheel in ensuring that we are building the homes that we need for Canadians who are already here and Canadians who are on their way to becoming here, and to ensure that the services that people are able to access meet the standards that we expect of our universal public health care system, high quality education, and other essential social services.
Thank you, right on time. Elizabeth May, 2 minutes to you.
The answer to will I, as a re-elected member of Parliament from Saanich Gulf Islands, go to work right away to ensure that our region, with our very low unemployment rate, our skills shortages, gets exemptions for temporary foreign workers where they're needed in our workforce? Yes, I will. And I appreciate the input from this community because it's very clear that our immigration policies in this country went off the rails in the last number of years. And let me just name it, and I don't want to be partisan about it, but it's so damn weird. It turns out that, a lot of people are surprised when I tell citizens and residents that we never debated the immigration levels that the government picked in Parliament. We didn't study them in any parliamentary committee. The government, it started under Harper, but it grew like Topsy under Trudeau, started outsourcing policy information to, say, hiring Deloitte, McKinsey and Company. Now, in fact, the target for immigration to Canada at 500,000 people a year was chosen by McKinsey and Company. And the Liberals accepted it and decided to go for it. Now, it's fun. We are a party, by the way, the Green Party believes in encouraging people to move to Canada, to live and work here, because given our demographic bubble, I'm part of the baby boomer group, we need more people moving here to ensure we have an economy that works for everyone as some of us age. Obviously I don't. But meanwhile, we do need to bring in new Canadians, but we have to plan for it. We have to make sure we have the infrastructure for it. We have to make sure we have the health care and the housing and have a comprehensive approach to bringing people in, and that includes temporary foreign workers who must have a path to citizenship. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Laurel Collins, 2 minutes to you.
Yeah, and maybe I'll be even more blunt. The Liberals completely botched this file, and I am so frustrated. I have seen the impacts on families, on workers, on small businesses, and I know that businesses and workers here were surprised because I've been meeting with them, and yeah, many of them just feel like the rug was pulled out from underneath them. So yeah, I think we should definitely explore options for exemptions for our region. We have an unemployment rate of under 4%. And I've also been advocating for some of the people who are impacted, the individuals, people like Dino, who is a local chef at a restaurant, came here under a certain set of rules, played by the rules, contributed to our community, is a part of our community, and now is looking at potentially going home, and the small business that employs him is looking at losing some of their most skilled and vital workers. The Liberals made a knee-jerk policy decision after previous non-evidence-based decisions that didn't take in input from workers, didn't take in input from small businesses, definitely didn't take in input from our region. And I think in response to push from the Conservatives as they tried to scapegoat newcomers for the housing crisis. But the housing crisis is here because of Liberal and Conservative governments before them who did not invest in housing for 3 decades. So we need to invest in infrastructure. We need to invest in housing. We need to match our immigration levels with that. But we need to also be real about the fact this is because of government decisions that we're in this situation. So New Democrats are going to advocate for our communities, advocate for housing, advocate for infrastructure. Thanks.
Grant Cool.
Well, we have a consensus because it's pretty clear that revisionist history is the name of the game at the other end of the table. I'll give you personal experience on this, having tried to find pilots for various companies that my family has to try to find marine crew, insufficient quantities of those people in Canada. During the Liberal time 5 years ago, they just all disappeared and our work had to stop. It's a very difficult circumstance for many companies in Canada, many businesses in Canada, and we have to absolutely fix it. But it all comes down to some very important pieces, some changes that have to be made. And we're going to make that, and it's absolutely clear in the Conservative platform that we're going to do that. And we are also going to target specific sectors and specific regions of the country to ensure that those businesses and those communities get the workers that they need to do the work. But I'll just add one piece to this, which everybody always forgets, and I just want to make sure we understand it. Our economy is so messed up right now that all of the stuff that we talk about in terms of what we want to accomplish is just hopes and dreams. If we don't find a way to improve the performance of our economy in terms of our GDP, in terms of our productivity, none of this matters, because no government, regardless of whose it is, will have the capacity to meet any of these promises.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. Okay, we're going to move to our panel now. I'm going to invite my friend Rory Coleman to come up, who is the CEO of the Vancouver Island Construction Association. Rory.
Thanks, Bruce. Thank you, everyone, for coming out here. So I have the dubious distinction of talking about housing and construction. The two are the same, but they're different, and they're quite large and they're quite complex. I'm going to do a little bit more of a pivot from what you see on the screen there, because I didn't quite read all the materials thoroughly. But I do have some commentary when I talk about the housing strategy accountability. It's probably arguably one of the most urgent and complex issues facing the CRD. Despite several years of high levels of commitments under National Housing Strategy, condition for builders, renters, prospective homeowners continues to worsen. I don't think any of us disagree with that. Let's start with the numbers. As of March 2025, the benchmark for a single-family home in Victoria was, you guessed it, $1.3 million. That's up 3.6% from last year. And it's more than double the $600,000 it was 10 years ago. Over the same period, household incomes haven't kept pace. For most families, the dream of homeownership has become out of reach. I have two young daughters that are trying to just find a place to live. They can't do it. They can't do it without having 2, 3, and perhaps parents' help. The rental market offers little comfort. In 2012, a one-bedroom unit downtown Victoria cost $950 a month. Today, it's over $2,200, and even higher in some neighborhoods. Communities like Esquimalt, Saanich have also seen a sharp increase, especially in purpose-built rentals that are replacing the more stable secondary market option like investor-owned condos and suites. Vacancy rates are consistently below 1%. Driving up rents and reducing housing security for tenants. And these pressures aren't happening in isolation. They're being amplified by growth. Between 2016 and 2021, the Capital Regional District population grew by 8%, at a pace that's expected to accelerate. By 2041, the CRD is projected to grow by over 100,000 new residents, largely driven by both international immigration and interprovincial migration. Now again, these are being considered as well with recent migration and immigration changes. The end state is there is still that project, those projected numbers are still going to hit our communities. People are drawn here for the quality of life, but the infrastructure and the housing have not kept up. This is symptomatic right across the country, particularly around infrastructure. There's been a lack of investment, there's been a lack of priority when it comes to issues that relate to our communities. We're already seeing the impacts of traffic, 45 minutes to get here from downtown, services and affordability. Now again, these aren't federal matters, but they do reside at a federal level, particularly where funding is considered. Add to the broader cost of living, shelter and food costs, BC has climbed 30% in the last 5 years alone. The CPI, the Consumer Price Index for Victoria, rose 2.4% last year, and the living wage sits at $26.78 an hour. That's $10 higher than the minimum wage. People are working full-time and still struggling to keep up with things. For builders, these conditions are a challenging environment. Delays in municipal permitting, uncertainty in funding programs, and a lack of alignment between federal, provincial, and local housing initiatives continue to drive up projects that could make a difference. The National Housing Strategy may have ambitious goals, but we have to deliver tangible results with this. I'm not even going to talk about workforce development that Bruce talked to about workforce and trades and training. That's a whole element that needs to be supported on a national level. So my question is this. Given the compounding pressures of affordability, infrastructure strain, and rapid population growth, what specific measures would your party implement to strengthen the accountability and effectiveness of the National Housing Strategy, support the delivery of more housing, especially attainable workforce housing, and reduce the barriers that continue to stall construction in our region?
By why it is that Canada doesn't seem to be able to act like a country or even think like a country, and yet the 27 separate nation states of the European Union managed to collaborate really well with 23 separate official languages and, of course, not that long ago being at war with each other. So what Greens propose, and this is not ducking the question around specific questions around housing, but we need alignment, we need policy alignment. There's only one taxpayer, and if every order of government is pulling in a different direction, we don't get very far. So we want to model what happened in Australia did a long time ago, called the Council of Australian Governments, plural, where they bring to the same table to come up with national policy initiatives, the federal, and in Australia the state, and local governments. We would add a fourth quadrant, which is Indigenous governments. We don't have, as an OECD country, any national housing policy, national transportation policy, you name it, because we don't pull together. Now, the weirdness of Trump is we have an opportunity to pull together, to say we're going to sit at one table and we're going to make sure that the federal, provincial, local, and Indigenous governments are pulling in the same direction with an agreement that we have to build housing, build social housing, and make sure we do it rapidly.
Thank you. Ms. Collins.
Thanks for the question. It really shouldn't be this hard for people in our community to find housing, for workers to find homes, and for employers to find skilled labor. Honestly, the Liberal government's changes to the kind of knee-jerk changes to the immigration system have made it harder for folks to find skilled labor. And we actually need to make sure that we can continue to build our infrastructure, grow our communities, and support people here in our community. We need to invest more heavily in the trades, ensuring that we have skilled labor here in our region. There was a time that housing was affordable, where you had one job that paid for your rent or your mortgage. And when the government built housing, it's why New Democrats are proposing building 3 million new homes, new units of housing, truly affordable housing, so that workers and families can live in our communities. We've also announced a plan for victory bonds, and this is something that we did during the Second World War. It brought in more money than taxes during that time, and this would be directly invested in critical infrastructure, in housing, in building, in making our communities more resilient. I hear other parties talking about housing and about building housing, but I think a lot of folks are concerned when they hear some of the background of Mark Carney and at Brookfield, where they exploited the housing market, where they raised rents, they evicted tenants, and the Conservative plan to sell off public land to private developers will build housing, but only for those at the very top. We need to build truly affordable housing in our communities, for families, for workers, for our country.
Thank you. Mr. Cool.
I'm going to say it. We need to let the market do this. And it starts with some very simple things. People need to be able to afford to build homes, to pay for their homes, to buy their homes. And that starts with improving the economy so that people have higher paying jobs, and that we correct some of the issues with respect to taxation. We were the ones that started, cancel the carbon tax. And now the Liberals have picked it up in their own manner. But are they really going to do that? Of course they're not. They're going to just change some aspect of it and not really make a difference to people. And this is where it starts. I can't tell you how many people have told me exactly the same things over the last 2 weeks. You go to the house, you talk to the couple, they have a couple of kids, and they say to me, we can't make any progress because between taxation and housing, it takes up 70% of our income. We cannot expect us to solve the housing problem when there is literally no one who can afford to buy the houses. So yes, all of the things that you talked about are absolutely necessary, and we will absolutely do those. But until we fix the root problem, there is no solution that is going to work.
Thank you. Mr. Greaves.
Housing is at the absolute heart of our party's platform and Mark Carney's vision for the change that Canada needs after this federal election. The housing crisis in Canada at the moment is a classic example of market failure, and what it requires is government to step in and help provide the housing to the folks who are being left out of the housing that the free market is currently providing. A couple of specific items in our platform that address this need. First off, the federal government is getting back into the business of building social housing directly. It's been more than 30 years in which the federal government has not continued to invest in publicly owned social housing, and that has placed increasing pressure on market housing, particularly at the lower end of the income spectrum. Mark Carney has committed that the Liberal Party, if re-elected, will create a new federal agency parallel to CMHC whose task will be the construction of social housing on federally owned lands and the administration of that housing in a way that will provide it to some of the most vulnerable members of our communities, but also folks who have a job, who work hard, and have difficulty affording market housing. They'll be able to access social housing, which will then in turn take pressure off of the availability of market units within their communities. Other things that we've announced in our housing platform include eliminating the GST on the first $1 million of home pricing for first-time home buyers. In addition, through coordination with the provinces, through the nationalization of standards and work on trades and certifications and licensing programs, we're going to increase the number of skilled laborers, the number of folks able to work in this sector to build the homes that we need, in the process helping to shore up some of the expected impacts on employment from the tariff war with the United States. And overall, the interventions that we've outlined in our policy are going to double the rate of new home construction in this country over the next 10 years. Housing is at the center of some of the challenges that we face as a country, and we are going to place it front and center in our priorities in government so that every Canadian can access a home and have secure, stable housing for them and for their families.
Next, we're going to hear some words and some ideas surrounding safe communities and public safety. This is Jeff Bray, who is the CEO of the Downtown Victoria Business Association.
Thank you very much, Bruce, and thank you to the Chamber for organizing this. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out. I think, we have lots of talk these days about democracy or lack of democracy, and there's nothing more democratic than having candidates in a room with electors and exchanging ideas and answers. I've sat in those chairs in a previous life, and so I also want to thank all of the candidates. The commitment it takes to put your name forward and to do all the work and to take all of the comments and criticisms, is not an easy task. So thank you all for participating in the election. So I'm going to talk from a downtown Victoria perspective, but also my professional life. I've also been the president of the BC Business Improvement Association, which represents 70 business improvement areas across the province. So while I am very much speaking about downtown Victoria, these issues resonate really throughout the province, and also large urban centers and increasingly smaller and smaller communities. And it seems a week doesn't go by where we don't see in the news a story about random violence or thefts or vandalism in our urban cores. And really, the sense and feeling that these issues have been on the rise over the last 10 years. And the top issues that are affecting businesses in our urban cores and their staff and their customers are substantial theft, vandalism, property damage, violent behavior in and around the businesses, public urination, and other street disorder issues. Some of this we know, of course, is tied to homelessness, mental health, and addictions, so we understand there are complex factors in play with some of this behavior. None of that mitigates the impact on businesses. And if you imagine having somebody rob your house, you know how violated you might feel around that, how unsafe it might make you feel. That happens weekly. Imagine that impact. Imagine you have a college-aged child working in a business that gets robbed on a weekly basis or has fights at the doorstep of their business. How comfortable you would have in your young adult working in a business like that. So these have significant impacts that wear over time. And they impact not only the sense of safety for staff and customers, but the desirability of our urban cores. The narrative here, if anybody listens to Adam Sterling, I mean, he does many hours a week on this very issue, and that has an impact on people's willingness to go and support local businesses, which is more important now than ever. Leger Poll did a poll in Western Canada in February, and it asked people, do you think your downtown core has gotten worse than last year? Greater Victorians said, 73% of them said it's gotten worse than last year. That's the top in Western Canada. So that tells you what the sentiment is out there, and the sentiment leads to action, which is avoiding downtown. All of this hurts businesses downtown, and many are now telling us that they're openly questioning whether or not they're going to renew their leases. So again, we lose our businesses in the downtown core, we lose our downtown. For downtown businesses, rampant theft, open drug use, violence, and vandalism is aided by a revolving door justice system. In Victoria, we have examples of police stings looking at shoplifting, where they arrest somebody with over 100 criminal convictions, not arrests, criminal convictions, who is immediately released on bail and is arrested stealing from the same store in the same police sting. And this happens every single day. And the sense of frustration and hopelessness that businesses have, and a sense of lawlessness, really impacts people's willingness to invest their lives, their hard work. If anyone's run a small business, you know how much work it is. And people are now questioning, why am I doing that? When nobody seems to be answering the issues that we're faced with. Downtowns need action, and they don't need actions in 3 to 5 years. They need actions in 2025 to start to stem this behavior. We know it's a relatively small number of people that commit most of these crimes. Anyone who's worked in HR knows that 20% of your staff create 80% of your problems, and that's the same thing here. It's a small number of people who are doing these repeat criminal activities. But if they were held without bail, pending their trial, and then, if convicted, actually given real jail time, that small group, removed from being in our urban centers every single day, would dramatically reduce this street disorder and this crime issue. Bail reform is one of the things of these multiple complex issues that rests at the federal level. So I am interested in what your party's position is with respect to bail reform, to look at eliminating the ability for repeat criminal offenders from getting bail pending trial. So again, repeat criminal offenders. And yes, I have to give you the order this time, and this time it starts with Mr. Cool.
I'm going to do something very wild here and propose that maybe this is something we can all work on together. Because these are our brothers and sisters and fellow citizens, and we are abandoning them. That's my personal feeling on this subject. Who of us, let's do a little poll. Who of us here who have not been affected by this because they have family members, brothers, sisters, cousins, or friends who are homeless and on the street? Everybody, anybody who's had this happen, feel this. There's a lot of us that feel this, and this is a very serious problem that we have to be serious about, and we have to stop fighting each other on this one, because we are harming a lot of people. Conservative government has been very clear on this. We have to fix things, and we have to do it in a way which builds consensus, starts with compassion, and helps these people. And we're going to have to make some tough choices, but we can make those tough choices together. We have to do things, what you proposed is absolutely true. We're going to have to repeal C-75. We're going to have to find some better way to deal with that circumstance. But most importantly, we have to agree to fund treatment, recovery, enforcement, and a justice system that can manage this process. I've had the privilege of learning a lot about this from Alberta, Portugal, and other places like that. And there are many systems that we can work with and model ourselves. There's no reason why we can't do this, and I would definitely advocate for working together to solve this problem.
Thank you. Mr. Greaves.
Thanks so much. It's a vital question. It's one that we're hearing from members right across the community, and it speaks not just to the really vital dimensions of helping to address some of the chronic health challenges, mental health and addiction challenges that some of the poorest and most vulnerable members of our community are facing, but also speaks to the way in which those so-called social issues are also fundamentally tied to economic issues, the vitality of downtown, the vitality of small businesses downtown in particular. It's clear that we haven't made the progress as a community that we would have hoped to over the last 5 years plus in terms of addressing what is now clearly a chronic challenge related to homelessness, encampments, and people who are ill in our downtown. And that has had the ripple effects of making many citizens, many residents feel less safe when they travel downtown, less willing to take their kids downtown, and that we lose much of our vital public realm as a result. It's a challenge that does require governments to work together. These are challenges that really need to be addressed most immediately by governments closest to the problem. That means local and provincial governments need to step up and need to address this issue more effectively than they've been doing. But in this riding that I'm seeking to represent of Victoria, we have 3 municipalities, 3 provincial members of the Legislative Assembly, and that means a lot of different politicians at the municipal level and the provincial level, as well as countless community stakeholders who could maybe benefit from some more coordination as well, who need to be brought to a table to facilitate solutions, including through federal resources being brought to bear in our community. In terms of bail reform, Mark Carney has said clearly in our platform that we as a government will look at the question of reforming the criminal code so that violent offenders and multiple repeat offenders are not released on bail pending their trials, but that the small percentage of people living homeless downtown are no longer in a position to create the kind of disproportionate disruption to the local economy and to local senses of security and well-being as we've been seeing. It's an important priority. It requires cooperation, and it will require a federal role to amend the criminal code to make it happen.
Thank you. Ms. May.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Jeff. And I have to say that as someone who's practiced law, and I've never practiced criminal law, but my stepson is a prosecutor for the BC government. And we look at these things and talk about them a lot because we're really dealing with a problem that is largely provincial and largely a question of funding. We need more provincial funding so judges can get through court cases faster and prisons don't get overcrowded. If we refuse to grant bail to people, the prisons get overcrowded to the point where there are charter challenges, people released. The whole system becomes increasingly clogged because of a lack of support for basic criminal justice reform to make sure people move through the system and we try to stop crime before it happens. I want to pause for a moment and just say Victoria has been blessed to have Chief Manock. Our Victoria Police Force is one of the finest in the country with great skills and more training than most police forces across Canada in how to de-escalate dangerous situations, how to avoid violent crime. But I take your point, Jeff, we need many more supports to make sure that people are given the support so they're useful members of society and not on the streets. I want to point to one example because I love it. It's a social enterprise genius in Winnipeg named Sean Loney, who uses only convicts to build housing. He trains them up as construction workers. They love their work. And he goes back to the police and says, How many of these people are costed, because you said the small numbers, what made me think of Sean Looney, repeat offenders who take up a disproportionate amount of policing time? He said, why don't we, if we can get these guys off the street for good and there's no recidivism, why don't you split the savings with us and reinvest it in our social enterprise so we get more people off the streets, more people building homes, solving more than one problem at one time. This is a multifaceted problem. The federal government can't solve it through the criminal code alone. It's going to take really thoughtful, consistent application of principles to protect our downtown urban cores and the businesses in them. It's not exclusive, as you know, to Victoria. I hear the same complaints as I go across the country from downtown businesses, whether they're in Guelph or Halifax. It needs to be dealt with and on an urgent basis, and it's not just denying people bail. That just overcrowds the prisons and knocks the problem back upstream.
Thank you. Ms. Collins.
Jeff. Yeah, there is no one magic solution to this. And if it was as easy as just getting tough on crime, there wouldn't be any crime in conservative urban centers in Alberta or Saskatchewan. This is a really difficult problem, but we do need to find solutions, and particularly solutions for the people that are living this, the local businesses, the workers downtown, the community members from all walks of life. And on mental health and addiction, you know, I appreciate what Mr. Cool said. And the Conservatives have been talking about cutting all harm reduction, and that would mean more people dying. Toxic drugs are killing Canadians at excruciating rates. But the government hasn't actually been investing in treatment and recovery in the way they need to. When someone reaches out for a bed right now, if they want help, they are put on a multi-month-long waiting list. That's not how addiction works. You need a bed there for them in the moment that they seek help. You know, it's not harm reduction or treatment and recovery, it is both. And we also need a more responsive justice system that better protects our communities. New Democrats have fought in Parliament for reverse onus, so there shouldn't be a presumption of innocence for repeat violent offenders. They should not be automatically released back into our communities. We need to make sure that those folks aren't put out on bail if they're just going to reoffend. But we also need to invest in community-based bail programs for less severe crimes. Community-based bail supervision programs have an incredible success rate, about 90%. It means putting resources and supports in place for people so that they do not reoffend. This current system is not working. It's not working for the most marginalized. It's not working for downtown businesses, and it's definitely not working for our community.
Great. Thank you all for participation.
Thank you for being here. So we live on this beautiful island. We are surrounded by water. And in the water, in the marine setting, are certainly great opportunities to talk about that and to ask some questions. Please welcome Robert Louis Manning, who is the CEO of the Greater Victoria Harbour.
Hi, good evening, and wonderful to be in a room full of people that are passionate about our region. So we'll start off being really positive, and I think there is a lot to be positive about. So I'll talk a little bit about harbors and ports. Harbors are a place of refuge. They protect us. They provide safe shelter. Ports are places for economic development and productivity and jobs. And we're lucky to have both of those in Victoria and Esquimalt. And I'll just talk a little bit about the context. In a time of a lot of unpredictability and a time of tension, certainly globally and more importantly probably with our southern neighbors, ports offer an opportunity. They offer an opportunity for diversification. They offer an opportunity to receive people. And certainly in Victoria, we receive millions of people on the water. We receive them in ships, we receive them in ferries, we receive them in float planes, we receive them in helicopters. And it's a wonderful place that people want to come to and continue to come to, despite unpredictability, despite the fear that happens to be out in the marketplace today. We have some of the most highly technical ship repair facilities in the world. We have them in Esquimalt, we have them in the Inner Harbour of Victoria. These are places that employ high-tech skilled labor. We have professionals that sail ships. We have professionals that fly aircraft. They're all part of our harbor ecosystem and providing good paying jobs to our local community. And there is an incredible opportunity. The closest ship repair and graving dock in the world, aside from Victoria, is in Asia. There's incredible opportunity in Victoria and Esquimalt to increase that work. And we just happen to have one of the largest underutilized piece of real estate next to the ocean at the Breakwater District in Victoria. Once upon built to export many products that are no longer exported from our region, there's an opportunity here for diversification. We are incredibly well situated. For one, as an organization, the GVHA is a community-based organization, and two of our founding partners are the Cossapsan Nation and the Songhees Nation, both of which are keen for economic development and keen to steward the waters that have been their waters for time immemorial. We are strategically located in one of the most important supply chains for North America, and that is the connectivity with the Port of Vancouver, and quite frankly, the Port of Seattle and Tacoma as well. We are part of a growing and the first global green shipping corridor between all the ports in BC, all the ports in Alaska, and all the ports of Washington State. If you think there isn't collaboration with our partners in the US, that continues to be even to this day. But these are all opportunities that are facing us right now. What is challenging is the uncertain times. And I think as we look to how we pay for the future of all these assets, to sustain them for the long term, to sustain our local waters, it's how will we attract investment and how will we sustain investment. And I think if you were in any port in Canada, you would be having a very similar conversation. I can't speak on behalf of those ports, but we certainly, in a community of ports, we talk about this all the time. I think it's interesting, and you'll hear from Destination Greater Victoria here shortly, we're starting to see people as part of trade in a roundabout way. And we're fortunate in Victoria and our region that we continue to have a very vibrant tourism and destination economy. So my question to you, and I'll keep it short, is what can you do to help attract investment and policies that will help continue to make our working harbor, a productive, safe, and sustainable place for marine commerce in the future? And I have to follow this, don't I? Or I get in trouble. I know there's at least 3 people in our candidates that have a connection to the water and/or shipping. But we'll start with Laura Collins, please.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I actually sat on the board of the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority at one time, and they do some incredible work in our community. And right now, given Donald Trump's threats to our economy and our sovereignty, we need to be actively seeking diversification, investment and trade in routes like to Mexico, to Taiwan, to Vietnam. And we need to highlight and showcase our local businesses and give them opportunities to do that kind of export and trade in other regions. And when it comes to greening our supply chain, I have been a long-time advocate for shore power. This is both to bring down our greenhouse gas emissions, but also so that we can make sure we have good air quality in communities like James Bay. I pushed the government to invest in shore power, and it took time, but I was really excited that this year we got over $22 million for the next phase of shore power. Now, there is still more work to be done, but this work is really important. And I've also been pushing for better regulations for crews dumping effluent and waste into our waters. We want to protect our coastal communities, our coastal economies. I've been advocating for the Maritime Museum. for too long, the federal government has not invested in tourism, in our tourism infrastructure, in diversification. And so, we are going to keep advocating as New Democrats for investments in ports, in our coastal economies, we need this work more than ever, given Donald Trump's threats.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. And Mr. Cool, would you go next, please?
Okay, so as I was saying earlier, I might have some experience in this area. My family owns quite a few different marine operation companies, including one that operated the Port of Churchill, Manitoba. So some good experience here, and what I can tell you about ports is that if you don't have anything to move through them, they don't do any business. That is the nature of what they are. So there's only one way to make this happen. We need to start exporting more goods. And those goods start with the basic raw materials that Canada has so much of. So natural resources development has to be the key to start all of this. And if we want to have more developed types of products, then we also have to invest in manufacturing. That is a difficult thing to do, but it is something that one of the reasons why I've volunteered to do this job at the moment is because there are many opportunities for somebody like me to help in improving these aspects of what we're going to do in terms of manufacturing, innovations, and business opportunities for large-scale activities to build things from our natural resources. So two pieces to this are key to making something like a port work. You need to have things to move through it, and in Canada we only really have two choices. We can export our natural resources, dip into our well of natural resources, our wealth of natural resources, and start selling them, start developing the businesses that can then also use those, make products out of them, and export those too. Ports are typically in Canada at the edge of our country, so in the end it all comes down to export and diversification.
Thank you. And Mr. Greaves, please.
We're a coastal community on an island, and so our relationship to the waters and to our ports is absolutely central to the sustainability of our economy going forward. In fact, Victoria, and indeed all of BC, is in perhaps the most enviable position of any province in Canada in terms of the question of trade diversification, precisely because of our access to the Pacific coast and the opportunities that affords us to export to other markets overseas besides the United States, and thus, compared to most other provinces, BC is in a better position, by no means immune, but a better position to avoid some of the worst impacts of the current tariff and trade war with the United States. That's exactly why a Mark Carney-led Liberal government will continue to invest in critical infrastructure, including ports and railways across this country, including Churchill, Manitoba, that's for sure, but also very much here in British Columbia and right here in Greater Victoria. There are underdeveloped opportunities along our waterfront. Some of that land is federally owned, and so there's a direct role for the federal government to have a hand in guiding a renewed investment in the Victoria waterfront that's going to serve multiple purposes. Some of that is about the export trade, no question about it, but it's also about ensuring that we are providing other kinds of support to sustain the broader economy around maritime and marine activities in this community. So that means working with higher education institutions to ensure that we're training the personnel and the staff necessary to actually crew these vessels. It means that we actually need to ensure a stable labor force. I met earlier this week with stakeholders in the fishery sector who are talking to us about some of the challenges that they're facing in their industry from the confluence of tariffs, labor challenges, and climate-related impacts. And it's a reminder to us that the climate impacts do touch on all aspects of our economy as well, and we can't prioritize economic development, economic growth at the expense of economic, ecological, and environmental responsibility because they're connected. So we need to care for our waters, we need to protect them against local pollution, and we need to keep our eye on the big picture of reducing our contributions to climate change, because all of our efforts in this sector can and will be undermined if we don't get a handle on that challenge as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. May, please.
I want to thank you, Robert, because the Greater Victoria Port Authority shows remarkable concern for community and is more accountable and transparent and has done the outreach with First Nations that I would say is singularly missing from the Vancouver-Fraser Port Authority, which has a lot of supply chains issues, is extremely inefficient, and has never consulted with First Nations ever, as it has proceeded to double its size with Roberts Bank, putting many species at risk. So I thank you, because I think we might want to look at port authorities and airport authorities and see if we can't ensure that there's greater integration and accountability to local governments to ensure that we have the commitment to community. I will say that one of the things we need to do before export is capture the value of our resources. No more rip and ship. We want to make sure, if we want Canadian productivity to rise, one way to do that is export products only once we've captured the value added. So one of the responses the Green Party has to what Trump is threatening us is protect our resources in advance with strategic reserves, so we stop shipping out raw logs to be processed in other places, capture that value, get that raw material to the mills that want it for Canadian jobs, and then use that Canadian lumber to build Canadian houses rather than ship it offshore. What the Port Authority does in Victoria is so admirable. Why is it not replicated by the way other port authorities operate? We want to invest in the infrastructure, completely agree with Laurel's point about shoreline power, to get the cruise ships here, have them plug in, do more to make sure that our working harbor in Victoria is maintained as a place that also protects the Salish Sea, protects community, and explores opportunities for greater partnerships with the First Nations in this community to expand economic productivity and new trading relationships all around the world. And I think I'm out of time, sorry.
Thank you very much to the candidates for your responses.
Thank you, Robert. We always like it when levels of government come to town to give us some of our money back. We really like that when they invest in infrastructure and projects. We're going to talk about that now with the CEO of Destination Greater Victoria, Paul Nursey.
Thank you, Bruce, and thanks to everyone for coming, and thank you to the candidates. I had a chance to read everyone's bios, particularly the ones that I haven't met before tonight, and I think there's some that are quite qualified academically, so I may address you as doctor, but if that's inappropriate, please correct me. I wanted to speak a little bit about what we call the visitor economy these days, and then perhaps some discussion about kind of catalytic infrastructure that lasts decades and decades and decades, because I do have some first-hand experience both here in this role and from previous roles, which I think can help stimulate this discussion. But to the kind of what we used to call the tourism industry, which is kind of a jet age kind of caricature, we now kind of try to call it the visitor economy, which encompasses business travel, conferences, sports tourism, and kind of the broader supply chain behind it. It actually is Canada's largest service sector export, $148 billion, where the goods are produced and consumed locally, but from people from out of country. So it is classified by Statistics Canada as a service sector export, of which 3.5 billion of it is here in Greater Victoria. 2 in 5 families have someone sustained in the industry directly or indirectly. So it's a kitchen table issue for sure. And the way our industry's evolved is kind of about focus on community. We all recognize out now that a great place to live is a great place to visit, is a great place to invest. There is kind of no, theme parks are not really the thing they used to be. It's, authentic tourism, whether that be Indigenous tourism or nature-based tourism or vibrant urban centers. What federal governments are uniquely able to do, or senior orders of government, is really help move along infrastructure, right? And study after study has proven that if it's smart, catalytic investment in infrastructure that lasts generations, is catalytic and spurs the economy forward, not only in its build, but in its role as a gateway. So in our world, every so often we just need something that has a return on investment, whether that be a conference center or a port. And the case study here has been the Belleville Terminal, which will lead me to my question for discussion. In a previous role, I worked at a federal crown corporation and actually seconded into a senior official role, where I had the pleasure of personally writing a brief for a $550 million expansion of the Montreal port. Just the tourism portion, then it went to transport and immigration before the memorandum of cabinet was done. And then a few months later, I was asked by an MP who was a Minister of State for Tourism to write a $300 million investment in the Quebec City port. So I know that when there's political will, these things can actually get done. Lo and behold, I get this role. I moved from the Crown Corporation based in Vancouver, but I also had offices in Ottawa, over Victoria. And my board, stakeholders, mayor, everyone says Belleville Terminal is the #1 thing. We've been working on it for 30 years. And I had to sit them down and say, I just wrote briefs for $800 million worth of ports. Never heard of Belleville Terminal. So now we had to start from square one. Jeff, you'd worked on the file in a previous life. There've been many, many iterations of it. And we all worked together, the chamber, everyone, mayors, provincial ministers, and we finally got it done. But over the last, I've been involved in the journey for 12 years. Many were involved for 30 years. We were never actually able to kind of find any kind of dedicated infrastructure envelope. We always had to kind of bob and weave and thread the needle through whatever envelope was open at the moment. Yet I had personal experience as kind of a mid to junior, senior level official, writing briefs when there was political will, they found a way to make it happen. Which leads me to my question with each of your parties is, tourism aside, there is a need for infrastructure. And the federal government is the place for that to happen, to help stimulate an economy. Kind of what is your party's view on the federal government's role for, well-researched, evidence-based infrastructure investments?
Yes, we're in favor of the federal government stepping up to invest in infrastructure, obviously. Things like an east-west, north-south electricity grid, critical infrastructure we don't have. Things like following the recommendation of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and making sure this country has efficient, reliable, affordable, low-carbon ground transportation, public transit between big centers. And things like making sure that for tourism infrastructure, the money is there to build up those things that we're going to need long-term. Previous generations invested in infrastructure.
Museums,
we're cruising on
yeah.
that kind of infrastructure that we haven't invested in. In fact, we have a whole problem of deferred maintenance on a whole lot of infrastructure that we haven't been investing in. So yes, you can count on Greens to be advocating for this, to be finding ways to finance it. And in fact, we're the only party, I'll throw this in now because I mentioned about finding ways to pay for things. We're the only party, if anyone here goes to the Parliamentary Budget Office website, you'll find many planks of the Green Party platform have been costed and published by the PBO. No other party has any published costing on any aspect of their platform on the PBO website. We're not done yet because they're so busy still looking at how we're going to save money to be able to invest in things we really need. Tourism has enormous potential for this country. You mentioned some of the statistics. With the Canadians staying home in response to Trump, we need to make sure that we attract conventions, have the facilities to get more people to come here, capture that tourism dollar and keep it home and make sure Canadians vacation at home and invite more people from around the world to come and experience the enormous richness of the Indigenous tourism potential and the beauties of places like Butcher Gardens and traveling up to Haida Gwaii, all the things that are uniquely this province's strength, but we are not investing sufficiently to capture that business. And all I can say is, yes, you can count on me to keep working to get the infrastructure dollars for the things that this region needs.
We absolutely need to build a stronger, fairer, more resilient economy, not just to weather the storm of Donald Trump, but for the long term. And, we are so lucky to live here in Victoria with the beauty and just the incredible community that we have, but we need to invest in our infrastructure for the people who live here, but also for the tens of thousands of people who want to come and experience the majesty of Vancouver Island. It's part of the reason that I pushed hard for investment into the Belleville terminal and was really happy and proud to be part of the many voices that got that federal investment And I already talked a little bit about victory bonds, but what we're proposing with victory bonds is a dedicated fund for infrastructure. And during the Second World War, it raised $12 billion, decades and decades ago. This is something where we could actually invest in the infrastructure we need that we will own for generations to come. And I want to wholeheartedly agree, not only with the stopping exporting raw logs, investing in manufacturing, but also an east-west connector grid for electricity and north-south. Make our country more energy secure. Make sure that we are creating family-sustaining jobs for steel workers who are losing their employment right now because of steel tariffs, but just strengthening our economy. Our communities need more infrastructure, more housing, more services like healthcare and childcare, and that is what I will do. If you put your trust in me again, I will go back to Ottawa and fight for it.
I love all of the things you said. We should do many of those things. But until we have a way to pay for it, we have no way to do it. Once again, it seems always that the job of funding things comes to the Conservative Party of Canada. And I guess I'm going to be the one to bring that up again. We have to earn more money, one, and two, we have to decrease our debt. That has to be our first and only job before we agree to spend anything more other than the absolute necessities. We have a wonderful social structure in this country. We need to support it, and we are absolutely determined to not cut any of those aspects of it. But in the meantime, we need to start earning more money, and that means selling what we have. And we have to start doing that now. Until we do that, we can't afford to build all of these wonderful things that expand our opportunities, expand the beauty, allow people to come from other parts of the world and enjoy the beauty of our country. But we have to start building now.
The investments that are being proposed in the Liberal Party's platform and many of the things that we've discussed on the stage this evening are good ideas precisely because they will help us to grow a sustainable economy. They will pay for themselves over time by facilitating new economic activities, new employment opportunities, new revenues for government, new incomes for business. So there are things which, in difficult economic times, governments should perhaps reconsider whether or not they are adequate priorities given difficult economic times and many competing demands. But when we're talking about critical infrastructure, we're talking about investments that will sustain and grow the economy over time. They are prudent investments in our present and in our future, and they're deeply, deeply necessary for us to weather the economic storm that is now upon us. The Liberal government over recent years has created new funding opportunities to directly enable municipalities and other local stakeholders, including First Nations governments, to apply for federal funds to support the very infrastructure projects that we're describing. The Canada Community Building Fund is a federal pot of money to which municipalities are able to apply to the tune of $2.4 billion a year to pay for precisely the infrastructure that we're describing here. This is a critical need that our government has addressed in significant measure in recent years and will continue to be committed to over the time to come. The destination economy is a vital part of our local economy. It's one that we want to continue to invest in so that it can grow. That means addressing some of the critical gaps in infrastructure, like public transportation that's going to integrate our region more effectively and make it so that we don't all have to spend 45 minutes in our vehicles getting from downtown up here to Saanich, investing in new homes, but also working with other governments, municipal, provincial governments to do things like build a hotel somewhere near the University of Victoria so that we can actually have a destination economy in that part of our region that is servicing the second largest institution and second largest employer in Greater Victoria and the South Island. So these are investments that are prudent and that will pay for themselves over time, and we would be well served to invest in for our future.
Now, anybody who has any questions, just do one of those.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm Karen Morgan, and I am currently out of retirement again, fundraising for Shoreline Medical Society on the Saanich Peninsula.
Thank you.
Forbes magazine recently ranked Sydney as one of the top 3 places to retire in Canada, specifically focusing their article on Americans. However, right now, there's 10,000 people approximately on the Saanich Peninsula who don't have a family doctor. It's become much harder to recruit in the last couple of years, so the thought of more people moving to Sydney really concerns me. And while nurse practitioners and midwives are part of the solution, we still need doctors. So my question is, what will you do to assist communities like ours that is working hard to help itself, but is still struggling to ensure that every person has a primary care provider?
Are you directing that to all candidates or one in particular, all of them? Let's begin with Grant Cool.
Yeah, so, I mean, providing doctors is obviously a problem that's all across the country. This is not just for Sydney, it's everywhere, and we need to address this problem in all parts of the country. And it begins with some very simple things. The federal government does have the capacity to change the accreditation system so that we can, for example, I've heard estimates of 15, 20, 25,000 medical professionals, doctors from various countries in Canada right now who are stuck in the system of getting their accreditation validated. We need to accelerate that. We need to put dollars toward doing that. But I think in the end, what we really need to do is to take a very hard look at the relationships between the federal government and the provincial government and figure out how we can work better together. I learned something very interesting in the last few months, trying to find out statistics for some of the issues, one of the issues, doctor availability, wait times, availability of emergency rooms at various times there. And what I found was really interesting and troubling to me was that about 10 years ago, maybe coincidentally, this information became very difficult to find. Previous to that, almost all the time, you could find that information out fairly easily. One of the things that I will be advocating for is that that information has to be publicly available so that we, the citizens of our country, can hold our governments to account, regardless of what level they are. So I think we need to do a couple of things. One of them is obviously find ways to educate and provide more medical professionals, but we also have to change the way that we address accountability.
Thank you so much for the question. It is such an important one here in our region where so many of our community members do not have access to primary care, and that means they don't have continuity of care. This has severe impacts. I spoke to someone just the other day on the doorstep who went to walk-in clinic, something was missed, they didn't go back, it was really challenging, and they missed a cancer diagnosis, and now they're dealing with the impacts of that. We need to recruit, retain doctors. We need to recruit from the US, as many folks are wanting to leave. We, as New Democrats, have committed to opening 1,000 additional new residency positions for foreign-trained doctors who've been here in our country but can't get into our system. We need to invest in primary care. If we don't invest in primary care, of course, it's going to be in crisis. We also need to invest in midwives and nurse practitioners. And we need to enforce the Canada Health Act. We need to make sure that we are investing in public health care, that we are protecting public health care, because when we allow privatized health care in Canada, it means it drains resources from our public system. The NDP, it is core to who we are. Public health care is vital, and I think as Canadians, public health care is core to who we are. So you can count on me. I will continue to fight for our public health system and also make sure that we are working to ensure everyone has access to a family doctor.
Thank you. Elizabeth May.
Thanks for the question, and Karen, thanks for your work at Shoreline Medical. Shoreline was where I finally ended up after not having a family doctor after I had a hemorrhagic stroke, and 5 days after the stroke, I had a stroke of luck. Someone at Shoreline could see me. Sorry, bad puns. I'm very, very aware of our lack of family doctors across Canada. I think a lot of the solutions are found in Jane Philpott's book, which points out that we need to know that right across Canada, wherever you go, you have access to a primary healthcare provider, whether a doctor, a nurse practitioner, or team medicine. That requires, I'm going to agree with Grant, accountability. Since the year 2000, federal provincial healthcare transfers from the federal government to the provinces increased fourfold. Medical spending and healthcare spending by provinces did not increase fourfold. Some disappeared in some provinces in tax cuts to improve the re-election chances of some governments. What we need to do is make sure that we accelerate the recognition of credentials. As has been mentioned, we have a lot of Canadian doctors trained overseas who can't practice medicine here. The barriers are both interprovincial. Sometimes the barriers are within the medical society and the family physicians' regulation of itself. We need to get everyone at the table, Jane Philpott's main point, get everyone at the table and collaborate, because we actually agree on this. Our healthcare system, despite all the problems we're experiencing right now and the obvious nature of a fractured system, we still spend less on healthcare than they do in the United States, and we still get much better results. Longer life expectancy and far less infant mortality. We need to invest in our healthcare system. We need to bring in universal pharmacare to bring down the costs and the fastest rising cost within the healthcare system, which is prescription drugs. We can do this, and I do think it is interesting that I completely agree with every word from my NDP colleague, and I completely agree with every word from my Conservative colleague. This is an issue that brings people together, and we know that an example like Shoreline's system, which is a charity basis, where the doctors are salaried employees and don't have the constant burden of paperwork and hassles that mean they never get a minute to themselves to enjoy their own families. We have to retain our doctors in our communities and ensure that they also need affordable housing. I'll stop there. I think that ding was for me. Sorry.
Will Greaves.
Thank you for the question. It's a vital one, of course. Right across this country, Canadians expect better from our universal public healthcare system, and they're being let down. They're being let down primarily by provincial governments that are failing to deliver healthcare effectively, and there is a need for the federal government to hold those provinces to account for the billions of dollars in federal transfers that they receive every year in order to provide Canadians with that healthcare. I'm in full agreement with my colleague Ms. May's comments about the ways in which we have seen a bit of a shell game in recent years, where especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need, obviously, to increase the federal investments in healthcare, we saw significant increases in federal funding that some provinces in this country then used as a way to reduce their income taxes, to benefit certain constituents, and not actually improve the delivery of healthcare. That cannot and should not be considered acceptable. The federal government has a responsibility to be a good steward of the public purse, and that means ensuring that the provinces are spending the funds that are being allocated on the priorities that they're being allocated for. That said, there are a couple of ways in which the federal government's own jurisdictions can also help contribute to addressing the challenges in our healthcare system. That does include its responsibility for immigration, as well as for foreign credential recognition. I'm in full agreement. The idea that we would have qualified and trained nurses, physicians, and other healthcare workers who immigrate to Canada in part on the basis of the immigration points that they're allocated for those skills and experiences, and then not be able to work in our healthcare system does doesn't make much sense, and we need to fix that. We need to work with the provincial colleges that regulate physicians and services to facilitate more interprovincial mobility as well, while ensuring that provinces aren't poaching necessary healthcare professionals from each other. We also need to see the federal government continue to support investment in high-end medical research, bioscience, and physical research, so that we're also improving the ways in which we can deliver healthcare, improving cutting-edge medical technologies. And while that's something that must be done in cooperation with provinces and higher education institutions as well, the federal government does provide research funding in this country through the tri-councils and has a responsibility in this moment to really ensure that we're leading the way in terms of improving our understanding of cutting-edge medicine and medical technologies and implementing those changes in our system, at the same time that we're advocating for reform in the way that provinces deliver healthcare to make family physicians in particular no longer have to run a small business at the same time that they're trying to provide their patients with care.
So each of you will have 1 minute to make closing remarks and summary remarks here. Let's begin with Will Greaves, please.
Opportunity to speak to you this evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the Chamber for organizing. It's very clear from the questions tonight and from the diversity of responses that you've received that there's a range of challenges that Canadians expect their governments to address in this time, and that we need responsible, trusted, and experienced leadership at the federal level that can help guide us through what is unquestionably going to be one of the greatest economic crises in our modern history. I'm very proud to be part of a team where Mark Carney, one of the most recognized and experienced economic crisis leaders in the world, is going to take the helm in order to continue to steer our country through an economic challenge that he is uniquely well suited to lead us through. Our platform is clear about the need to invest in ourselves, to control what we can control at a time when some factors in the international environment and our trading relationship with the United States are not under our control. Under a Mark Carney Liberal government, we will invest in Canada to keep Canada strong and resilient and sovereign in this challenging time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Grant Cool, Conservative Party of Canada.
I'll keep it short. I'm going to just repeat what I've said a number of times. If Canada is to become the greatest country in the world, we have to figure out how to earn more money. And that's the basic fundamentals of this problem. Tonight you probably noticed that we agree on a lot of things. There are a lot of things we hold in common, a lot of principles that we believe are true. But for some reason, maybe sometimes with the exception of you, because I have read some of your platform and we do agree that earning money is a good idea. The rest of the major parties in this country do not have a plan for how they're going to do that. Stirring the pot is not sufficient. We need to dramatically improve how we earn money in this country, and until we do that, all of our hopes and dreams amount to nothing.
Thank you. Elizabeth May, Green Party of Canada.
Thanks, Bruce. Look, this is a unique opportunity for Canada. Crisis and opportunity do go together, and not just in Chinese characters. We're looking at something where in the future, I mean, right now, I don't want to even talk about the guy in the White House, because it's like being on a highway going forward and you've got this rubbernecking because there's an awful mess on the other side of the road. But it may turn out that we look at this and say, wait, this was the moment when we finally realized we have to get rid of interprovincial trade barriers. Why are we doing this? We reduce our economy by $200 to $300 billion a year. Why don't we fix that? Why don't we have economic sovereignty over our resources? Our productivity would go way up if we stopped shipping out raw resources, rip and ship, but process them here, kept the value here, and then we continue to invest in ourselves. You know, the Canada Pension Plan money gets sent all over the world for investment. It's not even required to be invested in Canada. Let's put Canada first, be a team that works together, and I'm out of time. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you. And the final word goes to Laurel Collins, New Democratic Party.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to this chamber. This, as I said, is my third election, and I have never seen people more politically engaged. I've particularly never seen young people more engaged, and that is inspiring to me. And it is because our future is on the line. And I think about what it means to be Canadian. I think about a small group of New Democrats led by Tommy Douglas who fought for and won public health care in Canada. If it weren't for New Democrats, we would still have the system the US has, where if you get hurt or you get sick, you pay out of pocket or you go into debt. And I was proud to be part of a small but mighty group of New Democrats who fought for and won pharmacare and dental care and child care. And so in this election, I'm asking you to vote New Democrat, not only because here in Victoria, that's how you stop Conservatives, but also because it is how we defend what matters most to you and how we keep Canada, Canada.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time and your efforts and your energies that you're putting into the campaign. It's a thankless job. There's many of us who many times have been asked to run for office and said, nope, not going to do it, not going to go down that road, not me. So thank you for your service, thank you for your time, and thank you for being here with us tonight.
So it's not thankless after all?
Well, I'll give you a thank you for that, that's right. Elizabeth May, Laurel Collins, Grant Cool, and Will Graves, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once again to Rory Colmo, to Jeff Gray, to Robert